The Denver Broncos dropped their 15th straight game against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road at Arrowhead Stadium. However, the Broncos made the Chiefs sweat and competed, showing that they can fight with Kansas City. We talk about what Jerry Rosburg's effect was on the team here in his first game as interim head coach. We talk about some news and notes and much more, and recap Sunday's game against the Chiefs. You get that on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, or whether you're watching our beautiful faces in high definition 4K YouTube on your TV, your smartphone, or your computer. Thank you so much. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody, Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host and good friend, Sayre, Bedinger. Sayre, unfortunately for Broncos country, the Denver Broncos have dropped 15 straight games to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. But, despite the loss, right, we can sit here and talk about what went wrong, what went right. We're going to focus on that, right, in microcosms. But the fact of the reality is the Broncos right now, I think the way that they performed against Kansas City on Sunday, even though that they lost, has some Chiefs fans sitting there wondering before the playoffs, like, hey, how come they're playing like this against the Broncos? So, you know what? We calling it. The Broncos made the Chiefs sweat in Sunday's game.
And I think if nothing else, it's good that they were able to do that, right? The Broncos had a lead in the third quarter of this game. Obviously, the Chiefs took the lead very early in the fourth quarter, but at the same time, you saw tons of fight from a team that looked like it had just, rolled over on Christmas Day, right? So a huge difference with Jerry Rosburg out there being the guy in charge of the operation. And we saw tons of big changes. I think one of the number one biggest changes being the fact that Justin Outen, who's kind of gotten, he's kind of been the butt of a few jokes in Broncos country, let's put it that way, as far as what does this guy do around Denver, right? I mean, Nathaniel Hackett was initially the play caller, and then those duties were turned over to Clint Kubiak. And so it was like, well, what is Justin Outen's role here? What is he doing? Maybe we should have known early in the week, Cody. Jerry Rosburg had a lot of positive things to say about Justin Outen, the fact that he kept him on the staff, I suppose, in the first place. So we saw Justin Outen out there calling plays, and we saw some success from the offense once again. 24 points scored against Kansas City. Another game where you feel like, man, Russell Wilson maybe played his two best games of the 2022 season against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. So Justin Outen calling the plays for this one. Ultimately, though, the Broncos did fall short in the end by 3 points. That fourth down play, the Chiefs coming in with the big-time pressure up the middle. It was unfortunate to see.
Yeah, and just so many different things, right? Obviously, the Broncos losing is not ideal. Nobody wants that. And how great would it have been for Broncos country, for Denver to beat the Chiefs? Chiefs fans would have probably had a meltdown. I want to say something here, right? Because this is something I continue to see. Right? Despite how disappointing this season has been for the Broncos, Sayre, what has been the constant thing we've seen, really as the storyline over the last 3 or 4 years, and not even that, maybe like the last 7 years since Kansas City's really been running the division? Everyone's like, okay, the Broncos, they can't compete. They can't fight against Kansas City. I think this year, and I think in the last couple of years, we've seen the Broncos fight against Kansas City. It's not like they're I would say, well, they are outmatched in some aspects especially, but I would say it's not like Denver's just rolled over and just accepted getting beaten down by Kansas City. They could have done that in that first matchup, down 27-0. They fought back, made it interesting, 34-28. And then this game, I mean, Denver had every opportunity to win this football game. So I don't want to hear that Denver can't compete with Kansas City BS that we consistently hear from a lot of national pundits. Kansas City is the top dog in the AFC West until somebody dethrones them. Nobody is disputing that. But to say that Denver can't compete against them, with all circumstances considered, with how the season's gone, Sayre, Denver has done that. So I think that is something Broncos fans should maybe hang their hat on, that, okay, you have to dethrone them at some point. but it's not like you can't compete against them. I think that's something that absolutely has to be talked about.
It does. The Broncos have been competitive against Kansas City on a variety of occasions, and especially recently. Remember, one of the things that we were kind of hanging our hats on early in the Drew Lock era was, man, he played extremely well on the road against Kansas City, and it came down to that. Remember that play where it's just out of the reach of KJ Hamler late in the game, and just a lot of close games. You go back, and Vic Fangio's defense has always played Patrick Mahomes pretty well, Cody. So you look at the team now, 2 one-score games against Mahomes in Kansas City. I mean, there's no moral victories in the NFL. This was kind of without the playoffs and the actual Super Bowl on the line, the Broncos season already over. This was effectively their Super Bowl, and they played hard. They played well. It just, unfortunately, man, you look at all the different details of this game. Like, that's to your point. There's turning points throughout every NFL game. We understand as well as anybody that, okay, you can't blame the outcome of a game on one specific play. But, Cody, we have to talk about the fact that with the Broncos up by 4 points, Courtland Sutton getting called for offensive pass interference in this game, an absolutely egregiously bad call. Just one of the worst calls I've ever seen. It shifted the game from being potentially, if I'm being optimistic, an 11-point Broncos lead at that point in the game to being remember the Chiefs scored, they went up by 3. Russell Wilson throws an interception, then they go up by 10. It's a 21-point shift based on one bad call. And it's not to say the Broncos had to throw the interception. They didn't have to give up a touchdown, right, to the Chiefs. Like, I'm not saying that those things, those things are independent, but at the same time, if Courtland makes that play, which he did, and he doesn't get called for a penalty, the outcome of the game, the complexion of the game, the momentum of the game, it's completely different. I know that I'm sure Jerry Rosburg was heated about that in his post-game press conference as well. And I just can't imagine how the team feels. Like Kansas City, you do everything that you can, to your point, to beat a team like Kansas City, to put yourself in position to win, and you get screwed over on a play like that, which is completely unnecessary. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing right now for the Broncos. Even when you feel like you play well enough to beat Kansas City, something completely out of your control like this penalty call happens and derails your chances.
We see it all the time. The Chiefs have become the cash cow of the National Football League, and it's hard to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, let alone the 12th man that is officiating. Even Gene Steratore on the broadcast said, I would not have called this. You see this on every single play. They're like, I would not have called this. It would have been a good no call if they wouldn't have not thrown the flag there. But unfortunately, you are right. That was the game-changing, the momentum-shifting play of this entire game. The Broncos did claw back despite being down 10 at one point in the fourth quarter, but unfortunately they fall short 27-24 on the road against Kansas City. Jerry Rosburg took over this week as the Broncos interim head coach and even promised us on Friday, said, watch Sunday's game, and we all did just that. How did the Broncos look under Rosburg in their first showing? You'll get that on today's episode. Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM, and if you've ever wanted to be in control of a football franchise, now is your opportunity to do just that. Your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. You get to manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all the ups and downs of a season. You always wanted to be the GM? Now is your chance with Ultimate Football GM. All in this challenging and realistic game world, Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Broncos listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. Jerry Rosburg took over this Denver Broncos football team, who now sits at 4-12 on the season following the loss against the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24. But there was a little bit of a different vibe with this Broncos team. There was only 2 weeks remaining. Now one after Sunday's game against the Chiefs. What did it look like under Rosburg? Thank you so much, Broncos country, tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you watch on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, kind of talking about it, we mentioned it right before in the last segment, how Rosburg told all of us on Friday, he said, watch Sunday's game, kind of like a bold proclamation, right? And we're like, oh, this is either bulletin board material or it could backfire. But I would say that what we saw on Sunday, we did see a different vibe to this Broncos football team. You mentioned the changes with Alton now being the play caller. We saw different scheme looks for the Broncos that placated towards what Russell Wilson, I think, has done well throughout his career. More play action, more rollout, some two-back sets. There was a lot to build on, right? But 2 games, right? It was an impression. Unfortunately, the Broncos lost. But what type of impression has Jerry Rosburg made on you?
Well, I'd say he's made a very positive impression. Look, I mean, the guy is fun to listen to at the podium. I love the monologues to open up the press conferences. I love the just honesty. You know, that was what was so refreshing with Vic Fangio. Remember with Vic, you always knew, like, if he was speaking positively about somebody, you could pretty well take it to the bank, because not that he was never positive about guys, but Jerry Rosburg gives you a similar type of vibe, right? You just kind of can feel his honesty coming through. I like him a lot, Cody. I hope he does stick around for whoever's leading the charge with this next coaching staff. That would be awesome. Maybe a special teams coordinator or assistant head coach or something like that, just to keep him around in Denver. But he's made a big stamp one way or the other, right? We talked about Justin Alton calling the offensive plays, and he explained that after the game. He wanted Clint Kubiak to be on the sideline close to Russell Wilson, and he wanted the play caller to be in the box. Henceforth, obviously, Justin Alton calling the plays. That's why that ended up happening the way that it did. Also, man, Albert O. How many weeks have we clamored for Albert O to be back out there? The first half of the game, he's like, okay, proving why he was in the doghouse in the first place, right? And then all of a sudden, he makes a couple of big plays, catches a touchdown pass. I mean, where has this guy been all year? Could we not put a little vote of confidence his direction? And it's great to see Jerry Rosburg putting his print on the team with just 2 weeks remaining, Cody, because a guy like Albert O probably shouldn't have been in the doghouse if somebody like Jerry Rosburg is taking him out, right? It's one of those situations where you can just tell things were not run properly with Nathaniel Hackett running the show in terms of especially specifically this particular player. So that was great to see. And there were a couple of other big changes that he made as well. I know you and I kind of talked about this off the air before the game, and special teams. He's making his imprint there as well.
Well, he did that earlier this week by parting ways with Dwayne Stukes, right? Mike Mallory stepping in as the interim, pretty much special teams coordinator at this point. And we all thought, okay, hey, you know what? Montreal is going to develop a little bit more under, Jerry Rosburg, whatever he said, because he even told us, he's like, I want to put Montreal in a great position to succeed. Well, apparently that position was not even on the field because he was listed as inactive for this game, a healthy scratch. And the Broncos had Kendall Hinton back deep returning punts at this point in time. So really kind of the approach for Denver is they were looking for someone who was just a little bit more consistent, a little bit more solid, making good decisions that would allow the Broncos to not be pinned so far back. And recalling going through this game, I don't recall a moment where the Broncos offense, maybe outside like one of their first drives that they had, was really backed up inside their own 10-yard. I think there was like 1 or 2 instances where they were, but for the most part, especially coming off of a punt, Denver actually had pretty decent field territory throughout this game. So there is that. I'm glad that you mentioned Albert O. As you mentioned, he struggled. He had a couple of drops in that first half. But that, I think more so, that's not an indication on Albert O's talent or ability. I think that was just more so where his confidence level has been. I mean, this is a guy who's starting week 1, getting involved in the action all of a sudden is just like completely siphoned out of the game plan for the entire season. So, shout out to Albert O, shout out to Eric Saubert, who had a couple of catches as well. It was nice to see that. We also saw Russell Wilson having more quarterback design runs, including a big one on a 16-yard touchdown run to the outside. Great block set up by Cam Fleming, Cortland Sutton, and Eric Saubert, with Chase Edmonds leading the way there. At that moment, Sarah, I thought to myself, I was like, all right, hey, this Broncos team is fighting. Like last week against the Rams was absolutely embarrassing on almost every level you can think of. But this is a team that really rallied, I think, behind each other. Not sure how much of it had to do with Rosburg implementing some of the changes that he did, but you can make an argument. Rosburg has kind of put his foot down and has made some changes that I don't think you and I had expected he would make.
Right. And you saw, like you said, the team was fighting throughout this game. They're playing really hard. And I think one thing to point to, and it is very important, very underrated, plays that maybe don't get recognized on the stat sheet, right? You saw a couple of times Russell got hit in the pocket. And one time specifically, he was getting dragged around by Chris Jones. And he fought so hard to stay up on his feet. And I can't remember exactly which play of the game this was, Cody, but I remember thinking to myself, how is Russ not down yet? He stayed up as long as he could, and he kind of flipped the ball up to Latavius Murray, who dropped the pass and couldn't make a play on it. But, man, the fact that we saw that version of Russ in this game with the runs that he made early on, the design plays, the explosiveness that apparently was gone, right? That he had lost, quote unquote, prior to this game that we hadn't seen. We saw him play really explosive. We saw him play physical and tough out there. Yes, he took some sacks, but man, I think you and I will agree, and we can talk about this more coming up this week, and just the fallout of this matchup. But the offensive line kind of let their QB down in this game in a lot of big moments. So Russell fought hard in this game. It's really tough to look at these things when you're losing. You're losing 15 straight to the Chiefs. You're 4-12 on the season with a meaningless now matchup against the Chargers in the final week of the season, and yet you see Russell Wilson out there playing his butt off, playing his heart out, doing his best to make sure the team can be in position to win. Yes, he made mistakes. Yes, he made some bad plays as well. But man, the guys are out there fighting, and I think that there's a lot to be said for Jerry Rosburg and his leadership. Also, the players coming to bat for Russ that did on social media throughout the week. There's a lot just in this game emotionally that you could tell these Broncos players are ready, so ready, beyond ready for this streak to be over. And man, it stinks now. We're going to have to wait months to see any sort of chance at them getting a chance to take a crack at the Chiefs again.
While they fell short at the start of the 2023 year, Happy New Year to all of you in Broncos country. They'll still have another opportunity this year to end the Chiefs' winning streak going into the 2023 NFL season. But that's a lot to look forward to for next season. Some of our offseason storylines that we'll highlight here on the podcast. We have covered every single day all year long. Despite the fact that the Broncos have one game remaining on the schedule, we have you covered every single day. Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in. But more so, how did the special teams unit look for the Broncos under Rosburg? And one key member of the Broncos secondary continues to climb the ladder with impressive play and being a key leader with a new career high in interceptions. We dive into that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. And if you're like me, where you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got something that is just right for you. You've got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think that they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate, 100%, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right, head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Despite the Broncos losing 27-24 on Sunday to the Kansas City Chiefs, there were a lot of notes that we were able to take from the Broncos' effort and almost win against the Chiefs. Yes, we talk about almost wins here, but there's things that you have to talk about in terms of what the Broncos can build on. What are some highlights? I think first off, before we get into some of the other highlights and things that I think are important to talk about regarding the outcome of this game, we got to talk about the Broncos injury report here. And obviously in Sunday's game against the Chiefs, rookie cornerback Damari Mathis, who has been spectacular for them this season, he left Sunday's game with a concussion, did not return, and he will go through concussion protocol this week, which puts his game status for the Chargers on Sunday or Saturday, whatever it may be, into question against Los Angeles. On top of that, Dalton Risner left the game in the third quarter with an elbow injury and did not return. Quinn Bailey stepped in for him at the cornerback position for Mathis. Lamar Jackson, not the Lamar Jackson everybody's thinking of, but cornerback Lamar Jackson, who was a practice squad member for them, was elevated on game day. He stepped in and Sayre, to be honest with you, I felt like he actually did a pretty solid job in kind of comparison to where Mathis had to leave the game. I felt like he didn't give up really any big back-breaking plays, which, for a practice squad guy going against Kansas City and Mahomes, who really did not want to look towards Patrick Surtain's way, they went after him a little bit, but he didn't give up anything that was back-breaking.
Right, and that was great to see because you need people like that to come in against Kansas City at a moment's notice and be able to play tight coverage, to be able to make plays on contested balls. Patrick Mahomes is going to put the ball in a position where his receivers can go get it, as we saw a number of times throughout this game. Man, I mean, he just puts the ball in spots that you're like, I have no idea how he even does this, right? And he puts the ball out there, and his guys have a shot at plays where you're like, man, that should have been a sack, or that should have been an easy tip at the line of scrimmage, or that should have been an easy PBU for the defensive back. And yet Mahomes is constantly giving his receivers, you got to tip your cap to the guy. He's really great and fun to watch from a football fan's perspective, not so much for Denver Broncos fans. So a lot of Denver Broncos fans hate the guy's guts, but Justin Simmons continues to, Cody, he continues to be the kryptonite to Patrick Mahomes, Superman. 6 interceptions this season. He gets another one in the end zone off Mahomes. I believe that's a career best in a single season for Justin Simmons, happening in less than a full season. Obviously, Justin Simmons is one of the best to do it in the NFL right now at the safety position. I think he'll go down as an all-time Bronco. To see him get another game-changing interception, right? The Broncos needed something desperately, needed something badly. They didn't get any points off that turnover, but on the punt, obviously, then we saw Alex Singleton make a play. But Justin Simmons deserves some flowers, Cody, for his 6th interception of the season. Another one off Pat Mahomes. It seems like he almost gets one every time these guys play at this point. So kudos to Justin Simmons for another big play, another game-changing play in the red zone for the Broncos defense.
Just love the fact that, it's a career high, 6 interceptions in a season for Justin, right? And he's had back-to-back, and then previously back-to-back-to-back, 5+ interception seasons. 6 is obviously a new career high for him, but just the amount of takeaways that he's generated since becoming a starter in the NFL is great, and he's now moved into 8th all-time in Broncos leaders defensively in interceptions, and he's climbing the ladder there. I mean, anytime you need a big play, he comes up with it. Now, Sayre, here's another thing I really want to highlight, and I kind of want to mention here about Justin Simmons. The fact that he has 6 interceptions in just 10 games while missing 5 games this season is wild to think about. Now, while he wasn't selected to the Pro Bowl, he will be an alternate in the Pro Bowl. I do hope that he garners some All-Pro consideration, even though he's missed 5 games, because for him to have this type of production is special. He's a fantastic player to watch, fantastic player to cover both on and off the field. They've got a pretty good relationship with Justin, and he's the ultimate pro. And his play on the field absolutely backs up, I think, the support that he is an all-pro safety, one of the best in the game. And it's hard to dispute that if you actually watch the tape there and you see his production week in and week out. So there is that, kind of highlighting a little bit more, continuing on some other game notes that we saw here. How rare is it, Sarah, to see an NFL team and an NFL defense force 3 straight 3-and-outs against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? The Broncos did that in Sunday's loss, right? A lot of things to build on, which goes back to my ultimate point. They did all this without Randy Gregory on injured reserve. No Baron Browning, who missed this game due to back spasms. No DJ Jones on top of that. You lose Damari Mathis. I mean, you're playing with a lot of different guys, and I think it's a testament to Denver's depth that they have, that they played so well. But, man, the fact that Denver did that without some of these key players, I think, is something that is worthy of consideration. There is that, and then I know you and I wanted to touch on how well the special teams looked.
They did. I mean, they made some huge plays in this game. Alex Singleton, as I just referred to, he makes the forced fumble on Kadarius Toney to set the Broncos up for their first touchdown of the game. The Russell Wilson run, that the one-play touchdown drive. How many of those have we seen for the Broncos this year? How many touchdown drives in general? But man, that was a great play by Singleton, and it just goes to show this guy. It was so deserving for him to be able to go out and make that play, especially on special teams, right? Because that's ironically where, we thought maybe he'd spend most of the season making his impact in Denver, but he's gone out there. He's had multiple 20-tackle games. I mean, the guy is out there playing with his hair on fire. That's the old cliche, right? But he does, and he plays at full speed all the time. They kind of highlighted him, the coaching staff did throughout the week, just talking about how much he loves the game and how he comes to work every day with that mentality, just an unparalleled love for the game. And you see that out there. For him to go that hard on special teams, and for the Broncos, coaching staff that's in place right now, Jerry Rosburg, who said, I know special teams. That's what he said at his introductory press conference. Well, you put your best guys out there, right? So he put Singleton out there, and he made a game-changing play, and it was fitting for him because he's had such a great season. He deserved – I don't know that he has any forced turnovers this year, so you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but He deserved to make a game-changing play like that. He deserved an opportunity to go out there and make that hit. And I love seeing it, man. Alex Singleton, I'll continue to eat crow since I was one of the harshest critics of that move in the offseason. I love it. I love that he's gone out there and played so extremely well. I don't know if Pro Bowl is hyperbole for him, Cody, but man, he certainly, if there's anybody else on the Broncos that's deserving or worthy of consideration, I know that process is over and things like that, but man, he deserves a lot of recognition for the way that he's played this year. And to obviously we're not capping anything off, but to sort of cap things off with a big turnover, it was awesome to see.
Yeah, and look, Denver's got one more game on the season, and I think there are a lot of things we have to address, right, including Russell Wilson being sacked a career most 53 times. And look, he's missed 2 games this year, and there's 1 game remaining. So the fact that he's been sacked that many times, obviously Russ has held onto the ball very long on a good portion of these sacks, but the offensive line play has been inexcusable when it comes to pass protection. This is something we're going to dive into on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos, coming off the aftermath of the Broncos lost 27-24 to the Kansas City Chiefs on the road, final week of the season for Denver. We'll have you covered every step of the way here on Locked On Broncos and your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you watch on YouTube. We appreciate you so much, Broncos country. Stay tuned every single day. You can interact with us in the YouTube comment section down below, so make sure you comment your thoughts on this game down below. Hit that like button for the algorithm as well, or if you want to tweet us on Twitter, we're available there at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.